Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Sustainability and Transportation Committee. It's September 18th, 2018, 2 p.m. My name is Mike O'Brien. I'm chair of the committee. Today I'm being staffed by Susie Levy and Lakeisha Farmer. Thank you both for being here today. Today's agenda, we're going to take up a couple appointments to the Sweet and Beverage Tax Community Advisory Board. We have updates on the Freight Master Plan Implementation Plan, the Pedestrian Master Plan Implementation Plan, and then a progress report on the Bike Master Plan. Then we will consider legislation related to pre-tax transit benefits. That is something that we've been discussing for, I think, over a year now, and my goal today would be to pass that out of committee, depending on how the discussion goes. We will hear the first discussion on a petition for a street vacation, and finally we'll get an update from SDOT on the Traffic Incident Management System, TIMS. We'll start the committee with public comment. We got about 8 folks signed up. Alex Zimmerman, you're first. You'll have 2 minutes. Alex will be followed by Megan Cruz and then Lou Bond.
Thank you very much. Sieg Heil. Oh, where is my face? Oh, Sieg Heil, my Führer. A pure cretina. I cannot find another word. I'm sorry. When it comes to transportation, it's making me totally sick. You are a freaking idiot. Totally. It don't have limits. It's go worse and worse and worse. Why? I don't know why. Maybe because you're anti-Semite, maybe because you tax sucker, maybe you're a killer. I don't understand what's happened. Look what has happened right now. Bike is a nightmare. And you invest more and more $100 million, make situation absolutely idiotical. This kamikaze drive everywhere. We right now have very busy city. And I talk about this for many years. Give them a license. And take $10 taxes. We need centralizes. It's a nightmare. People will be killed more and more and more. And you freaking idiot don't do nothing about this. It's go worse and worse. You want what is everybody will drive bike? It's never happened before. In Roma when I live, in Vienna when I live, in another big city, what is I live. Never happened, never will happen because you're a freaking idiot. Is this a point? And number 2, you totally cut parking for disabled people. Downtown right now, here in next courthouse, you cannot park it. You cut everything with this idiotic business transportation. So you can only use this parking. You cut everything. It don't have sense. It's idiotic situation. Stop acting like a cretina, like a pure idiot and killer, because more problem you bring, more people will be dead. Sieg Heil, my Führer. A freaking idiot, a Nazi pig. Thank you very much.
Megan?
Thank you. I'm here to comment on SDOT's Freight Management Plan report that includes a summary of the Final 50 Feet study. SDOT reports how innovative and valuable the Final 50 Feet has been for understanding the downtown supply and delivery chain, but it says nothing about implementing its findings. We're calling on this committee to use its oversight authority to implement SDOT and SDCI policies that support the Final 50 Feet findings. It requires no budget or cost to taxpayers, only common sense and political will. The Final 50 Feet tells us 87% of downtown buildings don't have loading facilities and rely on street and alley parking to receive their supplies. Even with zero population growth, downtown deliveries will double in the next 5 years. But Seattle is facing rapid growth. In just 2.5 square blocks in Belltown, 11 towers are planned and quickly being approved despite lack of credible loading facilities. These towers will add over 10,000 people and millions of square feet of residential and commercial development. So far, these towers have asked for and received code departures and exemptions to provide adequate loading. Without self-contained loading space, trucks delivering to these towers will spill onto surrounding streets, causing gridlock and undermining safety and quality of life for pedestrians and cyclists. SDOT's advisory letters to tower developers simply ask they maintain certain sidewalk widths and provide a mandatory 2-foot setback in the alley, even in cases where site conditions indicate a 2-foot alley setback isn't enough to provide adequate truck access or two-way alley circulation. The SDCI director is also on record saying that residential towers don't even require loading berths, but we know better. The final 50 feet found that the 700 units in Insignia's residential towers receive 200 package deliveries a day. The final 50 feet has provided site-specific data and showed us proactive solutions that require no budget. We ask the City Council to act now and direct SDOT and SDCI to implement policy consistent with the study's findings. What are we waiting for?
Thank you, Megan, and thanks for providing your comments in written form, and I'll make copies for my colleagues. I've been joined by Council Members Johnson and Sawant. Thanks you both for being here.
Sorry to be late.
Lou is next. Lou's me followed by Doug McDonald. I assume that it says Doug Mick, and then Doug McDonald signed up later, but I'm assuming that's the same person. But if there's two Dougs in the audience, one can go after Lou, and then Ross Tillman.
Thank you for having me this afternoon. My name is Lou Bond. I'm the general manager at the Melbourne Tower, a 10-story office building with Walgreens occupying the ground and second floor and basement for storage. We represent about 40 businesses in our building. The family has owned the property since '74, and I've been there since '87. The alley is of vital importance to us and all of our businesses. There are no other loading capacity on the alley. I provided a letter to each of you, and also a part of that is a study that we did for 2 different days showing the alley usage. Right now, between 1 and 3 trucks will be stacked in there for delivering and loading and unloading, and they can be there for up to an hour and a half together. New proposed development is planned to go in the middle of that block. We're proponents of the new development. We're excited about the new development. It'll help our block between First and Third and First and Third and between Pike and Pine. The challenge is they're wanting to put all of their, or the city's requiring them to have all of their traffic and all their cars to come in and out of the alley. Right now, the alley is already blocked up. The SDOT has already made changes on 3rd Avenue and limited the access on 3rd Avenue for vehicles. And now Pike and Pine have also in this last year been restricted. It's almost impossible sometimes to get in and out off of Pike and Pine onto these, out of this alley. So these new developments have to be able to use both 2nd Avenue and the alley. We're not against the alley's use. They're as much a right to it as we do, but they also need 2nd Avenue. There currently is a curb cut there now, and we propose that it continue to be. I've spoken to the developer. He also agrees that they should have 2nd Avenue access. Currently, the development that's right across the street, the 1521 condo tower, also has alley and 2nd Avenue, and the brand new development that was just done at 2nd and Pike also has both alley and 2nd Avenue, and so we propose the same here, and that really be considered. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lou. Appreciate your comments. Doug?
I'm Doug McDonald. I live in Greenwood. I just want to make a couple of points about this really bizarre agenda today, which has all these fragmented reports of various modal focuses. What's most interesting, there is no Seattle transportation plan, nowhere. The council does not have oversight of a Seattle transportation plan. We have little pockets of this and that, mostly focused on bright, shiny new objects. And in the absence of a Seattle transportation plan, the most glaring problem is there is no asset management plan to deal with the maintenance and the recovery of our constantly declining transportation infrastructure, which contributes to our constantly declining transportation performance. You can make lots of comments. You can fill time with several commenters talk about these specific plans. I know a little bit about the pedestrian plan. All the performance measures are either stagnant or negative. There's nothing after a year of the pages of strategies and actions that we were promised reports on. Other comments might come to the other plans. The Transportation Incident Management Plan, which is a critical function of keeping Seattle congestion from crippling us. Not a single measure of something that's actually been done or measured or tallied. How many responses, what time was saved. This is not an oversight of a comprehensive approach to Seattle's transportation on behalf of the council and the committee. This is piecemealing of little nuggets of information which are never added up to a whole and never step back to try to figure out what we're doing about the larger transportation crisis in Seattle.
Ross? Ross, you're going to be followed by MC Halverson and then Katie Wilson.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Ross Tillman, transportation planning consultant. I've been looking at the issue of downtown alley performance on behalf of two different downtown residential groups over the last couple of years. And two things. One, I want to commend the work that SDOT and the city have been doing on the final 50 feet program. The research there is very interesting, highly informative, and really valuable. And I would encourage you strongly to give that effort as it continues the support it needs and I think deserves. I also want to lend a sense of urgency to the action the city needs to take to update its policies, plans, and codes regarding delivery needs, and in particular with deliveries in downtowns and the use of the alleys. If we truly want to support the density policies that are already in place and the very rapid development of multi-use high-rise buildings, we have got to make improvements to our delivery system. The alleys are increasingly dysfunctional. Our codes regarding loading area designs in the buildings are simply antiquated. They don't reflect the needs and demands that our rapidly evolving delivery system is placing on them. It's critical to the quality of life downtown and to the economic success of individual properties. So again, I urge, we need some early and rapid action. I think there are areas where the code can be modified quickly to good effect while additional policies to govern loading are implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. MC?
Hello, council members. Oh, sorry, am I?
You're after MC.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm MC Halverson. Actually, I have a question about the bicycle master plan. It says 6 months update. Is it updated every 6 months, or do you just take sections of it?
The master plan is not updated every 6 months. The implementation plan, which is of the master plan, which may have 20 to 40 years of the projects, what are the projects we're going to be doing in the next few years? And so that gets updated. It's supposed to be updated every year. And this one's been delayed a little bit, so we're just getting a progress report today.
Where can I get a copy of this, the update?
Lakeisha might have a copy there for you.
I have one for the freight, but I don't have one for the bicycle. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie.
Hi, council members. My name is Katie Wilson, and I'm here representing the Transit Riders Union. I just wanted to express our support for the pre-tax commuter transit benefits legislation that you're considering today. This will make it easier for employers throughout the city to hook their workers up with transit passes. The employers will save money on payroll taxes, employees will save money on payroll and income taxes, and we will all benefit from fewer cars on the road. So this is really common sense legislation. It's been done in other cities. It's worked very well. We've been, talking with your office, Councilman O'Brien, about this for several years, and it's exciting to see it move forward. So I hope we can get it through. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Katie's the last one to sign up. Is there anyone else in the audience who wants to provide public comment today? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move on to agenda item numbers 1 and 2. Do you want to read those into the record, Susie?
Yep. Appointment 01027, appointment of Jen Hay as member of the Sweet and Beverage Tax Community Advisory Board for a term to August 31st, 2021. And appointment 01028, appointment of Delia K. Pereira as member of the Sweet and Beverage Tax Community Advisory Board for a term also to August 31st, 2021.
Great. Welcome. Once you're all settled, we'll just do a quick kind of name introductions.
I'm Jen Hay.
Jen.
Hi, I'm Bridget Igo.
Bridget.
Dula Pereira is not here today, unfortunately. She had a last-minute cancellation.
Okay. Bridget, why don't you give us an overview of what the committee does, and then we'll grill Jen a little bit.
Sounds good. So I staff the Sweetened Beverage Tax Community Advisory Board, and this board was created by the same ordinance that created the beverage tax itself. The role of the board is to develop recommendations for the mayor and city council on how to use the money raised by their beverage tax, and that align with the intent of the ordinance. We know from the ordinance that the intention is for programs and services to advance equity in healthy food access and in educational and early learning outcomes. So this board consists of 11 different members, and they all are reserved in different seats of expertise. And so today we're here for the confirmation hearing for Jen Hay. Jen is nominated to one of the 4 seats that is reserved for an expert in public health and nutrition. If I could just give a couple of words about Jen. Jen's already been...
Are you okay with that, Jen? Okay.
Jen has already been involved in the recommendations that were presented to you at the last meeting. She's a registered dietitian. She is the program manager for SNAP Ed at Washington State University King County Extension. She leads the the Healthy Eating Work Group for the King County Coalition. Healthy King County Coalition. She also serves on their governance team. So she's been a great asset to the board already.
Great. So Jen, it sounds like you have some expertise to add to this work. So tell us a little bit about your interest in serving on this and some of the things you might hope to accomplish or work on.
Yeah, so I am a registered dietitian, and as a registered dietitian, I recognize very easily the connection between sugar-sweetened beverages and the health outcomes that are associated in terms of diabetes and heart disease and things like that. And so I support any measure that is helpful in reducing those outcomes, and particularly when there's health disparities in our communities of color and low-income communities. And I see this as an opportunity to help direct, by being on the Community Advisory Board, making sure that the funds that are collected through this tax revenue go back to the communities that are most impacted by that tax and by the health disparities related to these sugar-sweetened beverages.
That's great. The good news, if you want, the glass half full side, is it appears that we're collecting some more revenue than we thought. The glass half empty side means that people are consuming these beverages at a higher rate than we had projected, which means we probably have more work to do than we thought. And I think those countervailing forces, from my perspective, mean that if we have extra revenues and we have a greater problem than we thought, we need to be making greater investments in that. And so really looking forward to, we had a great presentation last committee meeting on some of the suggestions on what we want to do, and looking forward to working through the budget process to make those investments, and your expertise will be helpful on that too going forward.
Great.
Colleagues, do you have any questions or comments for Jen?
Jen, you weren't here for our last discussion, but the recommendations that we took away from that presentation by the Sugar Sweetened Beverage Community Advisory Board, were incredible. And the work that you all did to rank order prioritize the investments recommendations was unbelievable. I mean, it was, as I mentioned to Councilmember O'Brien that day, a very, we are lucky enough to work with a lot of very smart people who come to the council on a regular basis and blow my mind. But this presentation and the work that you all did as a coalition to get to that point should be celebrated, recognized, and copied wherever we can. It was just an incredible amount of work, and I'm grateful to you for being part of it.
Thanks, I appreciate that. It was a really fascinating process to be part of, and I'm proud of what we came up with.
Bridget, we typically don't do appointments for new members without them being present, although occasionally we made exceptions. I don't know if Dila's absence, if it's going to be a challenge for her to make it to committee, or we should just reschedule her for another committee meeting.
I know that she felt very badly that she had that she wasn't able to participate. It will be a challenge for her to come in. She's executive director for Open Arms, which is a doula service, and she is constantly out in the field with patients. So.
So colleagues, I would be comfortable of Bridget letting you speak for her, and then we can find ways if we want to connect with her personally and just moving that forward today. If you want to tell us a little bit about her background, then I'd...
Sure, absolutely. I think that'd be great. So Dila, as I mentioned, is Executive Director of Open Arms Perinatal Services. She's worked both in public health and advocacy work locally and internationally. She also has a master's in public health. She's deeply, deeply committed to equity issues in communities of color that she works with, and to expanding services that would most benefit families who already have children or are about to have children. She is also on the Health Equity Advisory Committee for Seattle Children's, and she's executive member of the Equal Start Community Coalition, and so she just extends across a lot of different areas of expertise, and I think she'd be a great asset to the board. She's only one of 2 early learning seats, so it would be great if you're comfortable with pushing forward her nomination so that we can have that representation on the board.
That's great. Sounds like a real asset, in addition to Jen, to being part of this. I'm comfortable with moving her forward unless colleagues have any objection. Okay. Great. Well, anything else you want to add? We'll let you get to work otherwise. I'll go ahead and move agenda items 1 and 2.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks so much. This will be the full council on Monday. You're obviously welcome to attend or watch, but there's no requirement to be here for that.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you for the time.
Thanks. Agenda item number 3. I'll invite presenters forward. And Susie, do you mind reading that into the record?
Yes, the Freight Master Plan Implementation Plan.
Hello. How are y'all doing? Great. When you're seated, why don't you do quick introductions, and then we're going to jump into the presentation.
Okay. My name is Matt Beaulieu. A pleasure to be here again to speak with you today.
Hi, I'm Chris Eves with Seattle DOT and Transportation Operations.
Great. I'll just say that as kind of opening comments, we have what we call our modal board. So there's a freight advisory committee, bicycle, pedestrian, and transit advisory committee. The freight is the youngest of those, I believe, and the Freight Master Plan is also the most recently to be approved of those. But it's a critical piece, and it seems like with the way society's adapting to new technology, freight is becoming more and more important in everyone's lives in new and interesting ways. So this is critically important to figure out. And we heard some comments during public comment today, too, about freight access to buildings downtown. And so with that, I'll just hand it over to you all to kind of walk through the presentation, and we'll ask questions as we go, if that's okay.
Okay, great.
Great.
Obviously, this is our Freight Master Plan's implementation plan. It's slated between 2018 and 2022. The plan itself was enacted in late 2016, and one of the big parts of our plan, easy way to say it is project selection, what we're up to and where we're going, what we're trying to do in terms of the work we're getting into is understand our project selection, and that's one of the big items for us. The master plan itself is opportunity driven. We have effectively put a basket of projects together within the 5-year implementation plan, but have not specifically set a timeline on them. Our goal is to be able to partner with other projects in order to stretch our dollars at this point in time and give ourselves the opportunities that we need in order to get through the projects that we're after. We identified 16 projects over the 5-year plan. Those are Freight Master Plan oriented projects. In addition, we need to do freight spot implementation work, as well as meet several of the strategies that we're talking about a little bit later in the presentation. One of the big items for us is that the large projects require additional funding, whether we're partnering inside the DOT or outside with partners or with grant funds. We're always looking to make sure that we maximize our opportunities. To give you a quick overview of the plan update itself, we broke them into small, medium, and large style projects. Small being up to 100,000, medium between 1 and 5, and anything over that above 500K. I'm just going to ID a couple of the projects as we're talking about them. In the small projects list, one of the items was a freight master plan project on Holman Road, which would have signalized a crossing that was initially a pedestrian overpass. After discussion with pedestrian master plan and of course with the neighbors, we ID'd that it was easier and better overall for the city to not remove a pedestrian bridge, to make sure that we had a better route around that bridge for our over-legal loads. And as such, we've pulled that off of the freight master plan. Simply the end result was better if we took another mode priority over ours. Medium-sized Clay Street at the waterfront, we're including ADA ramps associated with our rail crossings nearby at the waterfront, which is also a quiet zone where we don't blow horns except for emergencies, and by we actually, I mean the railroad. And finally, sort of in line with rail, the large projects, one of them being 500K plus, there is a rail detection pilot study going on that is part of our, what am I calling it, Lizzie? ITS projects. That if it works out, stands to replace a 500K project with something potentially as low as 50 to 60K. It's worth us taking a look at that and spending a few $1,000s to see if that's worthwhile.
And so is that, is the concept around that if we can get a few minutes advance notice of train coming through in a road closure and direct that information to a driver, they can take an alternate route to avoid the delay, or?
That's exactly right. And with any luck, that lets us keep our entire network moving a little better, and potentially reduces our conflicts at those crossings.
Great.
So it also allows for timing changes to the signals to help facilitate clearing off those tracks ahead of time.
Great.
So I also wanted to talk about a little about where we've been at some 2017 ongoing projects. Michigan Street had an asphalt and arterial concrete project put in. While we as freight did not specifically fund it, it meets one of the freight master plan requirements, and it's part of maintenance and upkeep. It's one of our strategies. The freight master plan is a little bit different in that most goals are to maintain access, to maintain roadways, and to maintain lane miles for large vehicle movements, rather than to attempt to expand. We want to make sure the network remains instead of attempting to grow into more areas. Certainly a nice item for us is East Marginal Way. It's a very critical transportation route for the port, and as well as for bikes. It's a bicycle master plan, a freight master plan critical route. And we're working together to have already achieved a 30% design for a long-term update and have brought that into basically a grant hunt. And so far, we've gotten a little over $8 million in grants assigned to it. We're hoping to get more as we move forward into some of the federal grant processes. Of course, one of the grant successes for us has been the Southlander Street grade separation. That's worked out very well, and incidentally, it's the only infra grant that actually started on time in the nation. So we did pretty well, and that's actually kudos to our CPRS, our Capital Projects and Roadway Structures Division.
And we were awarded that grant in that first round of that new granting too, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people worked behind the scenes to get that going, and it was a really good success story.
Yeah, important project. We know it's been on the books for a long time, so it's great to see that having broken ground.
Yeah, we actually found an old document about 100 years old that said, we would like an overpass here. So
that's great. That's some serious planning.
Yeah. So in terms of planning and strategies, I talked a little bit earlier. Some of the things we've been tasked to do, I should say, with the Freight Master Plan revolve around strategy and policies. We have updated requirements in our own city fleets to make sure that they have side guards. It's a safety measure for us. In terms of economy, I'll talk a little bit later about the Urban Freight Lab. That's one of our other success stories. In terms of mobility, we're working to increase counts, not only just for freight and goods movement, but also so that we can understand better for our own construction, for our own grant application, for coordinating and congestion pricing. We're trying very hard to make sure that any dollar we spend gets used in multiple locations. One of our big strategies, as I mentioned earlier, state of good repair. The Michigan Street repave is another story to that effect.
We want to make sure that the assets that we have are there for a long time. In terms of equity, we are actually working with South Park and Georgetown to finish a connection. It's a bike connection, but it's adjacent to rail, so there are additional rules and requirements that the Union Pacific would like to have us follow. And finally, in terms of environment, Lander has been a really good success story too, in that the 4.5 hours of delay that we're going to be able to avoid now that we have a grade crossing saves 1 ton of CO2 for every hour of delay. So we literally save a kiloton plus of CO2 into our atmosphere just by virtue of that project. So the Urban Freight Lab is one of the items that we've been looking at in terms of strategy. And one of our big deals has been trying to understand an urban goods delivery strategy. So when we began this in late 2016, early 2017, we went to the University of Washington, who helped us develop the public, private, and academic collaboration. And it has worked out very well because the data and information we have has helped us change how we do things. The map that you can see, it's not really easily visible individually, but it's the first ever block by block evaluation of ease or difficulty of getting loads to buildings. And that gives us an opportunity to find out where we might want to improve our mitigation efforts, where we might want to take a look at where we may need enforcement. And as an example, this map, which came out just days before a proposal to limit all vehicles on 3rd Avenue to bus only, we were able to help understand that without some truck delivery along that route, we would actually lock away certain buildings from being able to receive their goods throughout the day. So we were able to, with data and information, provide an opportunity and maintain livability downtown. It's one of the things we want to do.
And in this map, obviously the warmer colors indicates more heightened difficulty.
Yes. And this...
And what are the factors? I mean, you mentioned the 3rd Avenue as an example, but in general, what are the factors?
Well, it's proximity to any type of loading facility, and we're talking about private loading bays, public load zones, alleys, and in effect, it has a little bit of an impact on how large the building is too. So the one comment earlier said 87% of buildings rely on some form of the public right-of-way. We were able to get an idea of how much distance it was to the nearest loading facility. It's helping us also understand if we need to trade out or consolidate load locations to better cover the downtown, especially because it has the largest attractor to us.
And if I might ask one more question, in the previous slide, when you talk about equity to work with communities impacted by goods movement, I think can you just talk about that again? You mentioned bike path, is that one of the things?
Well, yeah, Georgetown and South Park traditionally have very little in terms of non-motorized mode connection. And there's been a desire to make any type of connection possible. The Boeing facility to the north of East Marginal Way and rail facilities on the south really limit opportunities. So we've been working, well, the Georgetown Mobility Study identified the potential for a bike or pedestrian path, and it's very close proximity to an active Union Pacific rail line. So we're working to make sure that we meet the Union Pacific safety needs as well as our own needs. So effectively, we're trying to make sure that the gears turn as they need. In terms of the Urban Freight Lab, we've actually had some really nice opportunities. We've done pilot projects, one of which was in the Seattle Municipal Tower, trying to reduce the amount of dwell time trucks have at the load zones, of again, improving our efficiency on the network. We actually answered, it was Councilmember Bagshaw's question about alley congestion on a statement of legislative intent. And we have actually had some very good success in the arena of goods movement. Multiple cities are interested in what we're doing. We've had, through the university, international recognition, and that's been a wonderful item for us too. So it's really helped us get out of the chute running.
That's really cool. That's good to hear that collaboration's working well. On the, you mentioned South Park and Georgetown and the work down there, and I'm one of the data points we hear often is disparate health outcomes based on where you live, and South Park and Georgetown often are reported as having lower life expectancies, and one of the we believe one of the reasons is air pollution, and so it is a place where people live, and it's a hub of a lot of freight activity. There's other factors too, proximity to freeway. We know that the Duwamish River itself is a Superfund site, so those go into it. But I'm curious how the Freight Committee thinks about things like air pollution and like what technologies are available and the impacts on communities.
Well, among other things that are happening, the UPS has approached the city and is working on a e-trike pilot. In other words, a way to trade out trikes for electric bikes. It's more appropriate in the downtown Belltown areas where they have a little bit of density but not full 70-story buildings. In terms of equity and access, interestingly enough, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, the local chapter, had a contest on how to engineer East Marginal Way and 16th Avenue, basically the main intersection between Georgetown and South Park. And they came up with some really good ideas. We haven't had much of a chance to follow up on them, but they've ID'd a lot of alternate pedestrian locations and assets that Boeing has that we weren't 100% aware of. So at this point in time, the goal is to understand more so that we can affect our outcomes positively.
Okay, that's great.
Let's see. One of the other items that we have on board is the Safe and Swift Corridor Agreement. This is an agreement between the city and the Port of Seattle, and it seeks to put a lot of memorandum of understanding together under one umbrella and look at 3 corridors that are of mutual interest to both the port and city. This agreement actually helped fund the last dollars for the Lander project. It also is helping us move forward with East Marginal Way and our search for funds in that location too. There are a lot of moving parts in that, so it's important to understand that we're working as best we can with our partners to make sure our accomplishments benefit as many as we can. Among the other things we're looking at, this is just a list. Of course, you had mentioned earlier the Freight Board. I happen to be the liaison to that, and it has worked out really well. We've gotten a lot of great input from multiple people across the board, from unions to rail to local deliveries. All of them are putting in their expertise to help us with these outcomes. Very happy with that. Among the other items, certainly the Ave S carbon reduction initiatives, which Seattle is part of the C40, 40 cities attempting to reduce their carbon footprint. We will have an opportunity to put forward some of the research we've done and see if we can have opportunities to scale this and bring the information out to more cities. Again, vehicle counts and research we mentioned, we've got a 5-year update, and we're trying to make sure that we are data based on that. And finally, as we keep working towards things, we need to make sure that we're successful in grant applications so that we can stretch our dollars. That's really where we are right now.
That's great. I really appreciate a couple things. One, the update on the plan, and the idea of, I understand how instead of saying we're going to do this project this year, we are going to time the projects based on when there's other work going on to get some synergy and some cost savings so we can stretch that dollar further. The projects you outlined, are those all ones that, because some of the, some work's going out to bid right now for next year. Are those projects that we think will be happening in 2019, or are these just priorities and you're still waiting to see the opportunities?
Well, some of these projects are occurring right now. We're trying to get towards 2019 projects. Okay. We're looking to scope for studies, which is one of our big deals. We try and make sure that before we move, we've got an answer. Okay. And so I think one of the first ones is going to be a 2019 study of the Ballard area, a little more in depth. But that was one of our points in the initial Freight Master Plan that we couldn't find a specific area to give us a best benefit for project work. So we felt we needed to study more.
Appreciate that. Colleagues, any questions or comments on the update to the implementation plan? Thank you so much for your work on this. Do you have anything else you wanted to add, Matt?
I guess maybe wanted to reiterate Chris's earlier statements about how we've been successful with this plan by partnering with other groups and with other plans, making sure that we're utilizing money efficiently, that we're competing successfully for grants. And that flexibility, I think, is a trademark of the way we've implemented this plan. I wanted to draw attention to that.
Great. Thanks so much for that. And thanks both for your ongoing work on this and the whole advisory board.
Thank you.
Susie, agenda item number 4.
Agenda item 4, pedestrian master plan implementation plan.
Brian, how are you? If you two would introduce yourselves, and then we'll jump in.
I'm Brian Doherty. I work in the Project Development Division of SDOT, and I oversee our pedestrian plans.
I'm Darby Watson. I'm the Division Director of Project Development for Seattle Department of Transportation.
You hesitated for a second there, Darby, like somehow your titles seem to change every few months.
It's only been 2 weeks back. So.
Welcome back to your position.
Thank you.
Previous position. If you folks want to jump right in, let's just start with the presentation.
Sure.
Okay, great. Thanks. So again, I'm Brian, and our presentation will highlight our shared vision for a walkable Seattle, our prioritization process that focuses our investments on the frequent transit corridors and walking routes to schools. The draft implementation plan update provides a list of projects through 2024, the end of the levy, and we have increasingly focused on lower cost improvements to make our dollars stretch further and provide more walkways and crossing improvements as we move forward, and what we're doing to measure our progress. Seattle is already one of the most walkable cities in the nation, and we recognize that we can do even better. Our goal is to make Seattle the most walkable city in the nation, and we're close. We have the 5th highest % of people who walk to work. WalkScore ranks Seattle as the 8th most walkable in the United States, and improving our built environment is one of the important ways that we can make the city more walkable and more accessible to everyone.
And Brian, are those the metrics you just gave, the walk score, and I'm not sure where the other rank, oh, yes, someone must be counting. Are those the things how we will measure ourselves going forward?
No, those are not. Those are just things I mentioned in passing.
Okay.
So the metrics will be at the end. The official metrics will be at the end.
Thank you.
Our pedestrian plan focuses, again, the investments on the pedestrian investment network that are streets and intersections located along frequent transit corridors and walking routes to school. The prioritization also overlays an equity factor and a health factor. So our investments are focused on neighborhoods where investments will have the greatest impact on improving health and making our transportation system more equitable. And as we select projects, we look at along the roadway, which is sidewalk projects, and crossing the roadway, which is crosswalk projects. And we look at the top scoring locations in the plan. We look at collisions. We look at leveraging opportunities to take advantage of other projects that are planned out there. We also look at what's already been done in the pedestrian and bicycle safety analysis, and then we overlay an age-friendly factor, so locations with high % of senior citizens get a slightly higher score, and then we provide additional points for locations within urban villages, consistent with the vision provided in our comprehensive plan. Our draft project list has been vetted through as part of the Move Seattle levy assessment. And since our last update, we've updated the scoring factors to reflect projects that have been completed and new collision data. We've updated cost assumptions for new projects. We've provided additional information about sidewalk repair prioritization, and we've updated our performance metrics to provide an updated picture about our progress towards meeting our goals. And just a few highlights. By the end of the Move Seattle levy, we plan to deliver more than 250 blocks of new sidewalks and walkways. This includes 137 blocks of traditional design with curb, gutter, concrete sidewalk, and street trees. It also includes 116 blocks of alternative design methods, sometimes in paint or asphalt, lowering the cost per block and allowing us to deliver more within the funding that we have available. Crossing improvements often include new marked crosswalks to improve access to transit and schools. One example that we'll complete by the end of this year is a new pedestrian signal across busy Greenwood Avenue North. The project also includes 16 blocks of new sidewalk along Greenwood, and this case also includes repaving the street. So we look for opportunities to leverage our programs to minimize construction impacts and make our dollars stretch further. While the Move Seattle levy is a critical funding source, it's just one piece of a larger puzzle, and we look to leverage other funding opportunities as we're able. So just a few examples of projects that we've completed recently. On the left is a new sidewalk project we completed near a school in Rainier Valley that included a new crosswalk, sidewalks, and traffic calming to make sure speeds stay low in school zones. On the right is an example of our lower cost design walkway using asphalt at grade walkway to provide a separate walking space. The project provided a walkway at about 10% the cost of a traditional walkway. And these alternative designs are usually most appropriate along low volume non-arterial streets, whereas on busy arterial streets, we are typically following the more traditional design approach. And just a few more examples of the lower cost walkways. On the left is an asphalt walkway that was built through an unimproved right-of-way. So if I had shown you the before picture there, all you would have seen was a bunch of blackberries and brambles. We can install walkways with paint and posts, which is shown in the middle. That's an extremely low cost and quick way we can deliver separate walkways. And we can also provide at-grade walkways with concrete and natural drainage, which is shown on the right, which is still a lot cheaper than the traditional curb and gutter design. Okay, so here's our performance metrics. So while the number of pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries has increased since 2015, our population has also increased. So when we look at the pedestrian crash rate, it's actually slightly decreased when you look at the number of crashes per 100,000 residents. Growing the sidewalk network is a pretty gradual process, as I think you understand. At our current rate of construction, we are on track to meet our goal of 100% of the priority investment network arterial sidewalks completed by 2035. I will say, though, that this is dependent on future unsecured funding, such as grants and future transportation levies.
So, Brian, when you say we're on track, is that just a kind of linear blocks per year kind of thing?
Assuming that we can deliver, in future years what we've been delivering, yes. Okay. And so while pedestrian mode share has decreased slightly since 2015, I'll just mention that that's for all trips ending in Seattle. And on the other hand, our citywide pedestrian counts have increased by about 12% since 2015, likely reflecting increased density and population growth. After going up slightly in 2016, this year, the percent of kids walking and biking to school decreased slightly. And as you can see, our metrics are showing kind of a mixed bag, and we're committed to annually looking at our programs and retuning things as needed to get the numbers pointing in the right direction.
Brian, on the previous slide, where we're looking at collisions, rate of crash per pedestrians, and that seems, I think you started off by saying Seattle's one of the safer cities. I don't know what the national averages are, but when I've looked at data, we tend to measure pretty well, really well usually against other cities. But I'm curious, through Vision Zero, we lowered speed limits on unsigned arterials and unsigned non-arterials, and have done some work to lower the speeds. Have we seen anything results here that, I look at this and it shows there's still the same number of collisions. One of the reasons we lower speeds is collision at lower speed is going to be less likely to be fatal or serious. But I'm wondering if we have any feedback yet on that, positive, neutral, negative.
So as you mentioned, we are one of the safest cities in the United States. Our our serious injury and fatality rate is on par with Sweden if you just look at the city of Seattle. So, fortunately, the numbers we're already starting from a fairly low number or comparatively low number.
Sweden?
Yeah, if you look at the entire country of Sweden and just the city of Seattle, they're actually pretty close in terms of numbers.
I'm assuming Sweden is a good benchmark, but I don't.
That's where so that's.
I don't read the same journals that you read, but.
So Sweden is where the Vision Zero program originated, and they've been following the Vision Zero goal for a much longer time than we have. So that's why I use Sweden as a benchmark. And they've actually managed to reduce their traffic fatalities and serious injuries by a really significant percentage since they started their Vision Zero campaign many years ago. Darby, do you want to add anything to that?
I would say that this number, particularly the fatalities and serious injury collisions, really follows a national trend that we're seeing, which is unfortunate, which is an increase, particularly in pedestrian serious injury and fatalities, which means we're not immune to that trend. It's not clear what the cause of that is, other than more people walking and more people driving. So I think that as we are just begun on our trajectory towards Vision Zero, and I wish it was better news to share. I think that lowering the speed limits certainly helps and gives us more opportunities to do engineering improvements that can actually bring the speeds down. So just changing the signs and just changing the speed limit, that doesn't necessarily result in a behavior change. And so we're hoping that as we address the high collision corridors and as Brian's program improves crossings and makes them safer, we'll see an overall drop.
So, Darby, one of the things that those journals that Brian reads likes to remind us of is...
Robert Johnson subscribes to the same journals as Brian, I suspect.
UCTC, it's a good one. Generally talks a lot about how enforcement is one of the best ways for us to change behavior. And I've been surprised lately at how many constituents have asked for the city to contemplate putting in speed cameras in places where we are not allowed. Can you remind me again the legislative and other restrictions around where we're allowed to place speed cameras, and then maybe talk to us a little bit about what we could do to keep advocating for any changes that might need to happen in order to proliferate those a little bit more throughout the city?
Sure, and Brian, jump in as needed. So right now there's state allows us to put in speed cameras near schools from a certain distance from schools. And so we have done that. We've moved a few over the years to make sure that they're in the right place. We've seen wonderful change in behavior very quickly after these get installed, and we see very few people getting a second ticket. So one is all it takes. One thing that we're discussing internally and we'll probably bring back to you is looking at a diversion program to make sure that people who don't have the ability to pay for a citation have another way to pay their debt to society for speeding, and looking for a way to not make that quite such a onerous task on folks who don't have the ability to pay. So that's kind of where that is. In terms of expanding it, I would look to Brian to answer some of the questions about the policy at the state level that really restricts our ability to do that.
Sure. So just thinking about the current framework that we're operating in, we do have plans to deploy additional speed cameras at the beginning of the next school year. And then if we were to expand it beyond just school zones, it would require a change in state law. And I know that there have been some people working behind the scenes to expand that authorization. One potential idea is to kind of expand it to a distance from schools as opposed to just school zones. So maybe within a quarter mile of schools or a half a mile of schools, you can have automated speed enforcement. There's a number of different approaches that you could take with that policy, but it would definitely require change in state policy.
Well, I know it's not a giant moneymaker for us, but it is one of the places where we do look to have a nexus between the investments that we make and the revenue that's generated. And as evidenced by the examples that you gave today, the city's been really proactive about trying to find lower cost alternatives that still meet our safety goals. So I'd love to put a flag down that, for our OIR team that's sitting here watching this 2:30, 3 o'clock conversation on a Tuesday afternoon, that we should be supportive of that expansion in our 2019 legislative agenda, because I'm shocked again by the number of constituents that are knocking on my door saying, we want to install a speed camera, we want to use the revenues to be able to make safe crossing improvements in our neighborhood. And I talked to them about the relationship to schools, and they are excited about that, but they want to see it in other neighborhoods too. So love to continue to explore that further, and thanks for your good work.
I'll add that it's so exciting to see a cost-effective and effective program. I mean, this, as you mentioned, this program actually generates revenue. It doesn't cost us anything, and it works. It lowers the speed to make things safer. And the city's made a commitment, as you mentioned, that the revenue we get, this is not about revenue. That money all gets reinvested back into safety investments around those schools. So we want to be clear, this isn't how we're going to fund other programs we need at the city. The goal here is that we don't collect a penny, because everyone's following the laws. And to put a uniformed police officer at an intersection to manage this can be really expensive. And if you're someone who's inclined to bend the speed limits at the time, not to speed when the uniformed officer's standing there, but as soon as that uniformed officer's not there the next day, you can resume your habits, whereas these cameras make it permanent, which is really great.
On a different note, if that's okay.
Let me say one last thing then. I spoke to our Office of Intergovernmental Affairs a couple months ago to make sure that they are strategizing about this. And, Brian, you mentioned a path, and I think there's other ideas to pilot. There's been legislation attempted the last few years to give cities like Seattle more flexibility. Unfortunately, those have not passed in past years, but you know how Olympia works. Sometimes it takes multiple years. And so I made it clear to them that we are very interested in having this be a priority this year for a number of things that we don't necessarily need a uniformed traffic enforcement or police officer to enforce. So, yeah.
You mentioned towards the beginning that Seattle is the 5th best in the country in the proportion of workers who walk to work.
That's right.
Can you tell me what that percentage is, and also how do you measure it, and what are what's the average distance, and just
Sure,
curious?
It's based on the census data, and I believe it's 8%, if memory serves me right. And it's not a lot of people criticize the way it's measured. It kind of underestimates active transportation, but compared with other cities around the country, there's a lot more people who walk to work. It doesn't measure all trips, for example. Mm-hmm. It only measures trips to work.
I was just thinking, I mean, it's not necessarily directly relevant to what you're doing, but that is also how many people walk to work also depends on how many people can afford to live in Seattle, mm-hmm. anywhere close to their workplace, meaning in the same city, let alone in a close by neighborhood that maybe you can walk a couple of miles right. every day. Anyway, I don't know how much we can achieve on that without actually also tackling the question of affordable housing. Yeah.
Certainly a world in which most of the workers have to live miles and miles away from their jobs is not one that's going to lead us to increasing our pedestrian mode split.
No. And on the carbon emissions.
Neither one, and quality of life. I have another question that a constituent emailed in advance of this. We do have a few constituents who go through the slides of advance and have some suggestions. So someone who's been involved in the pedestrian work and has been on the board of Feet First asked about the point system for scoring and ranking priority pedestrian projects, and specifically wanted to know, he would be advocating to change the scoring system to prioritize sidewalks along arterials that are freight over sidewalks connecting neighborhoods to those arterials. And I don't know enough about the specifics of the point. Clearly this person does. And I don't know, Brian, if you know the specifics about how we prioritize this system.
So the prioritization does include things like street classification. So streets, busy streets do score higher than streets with low volume, non-arterial streets.
Okay.
I don't believe the scoring factor specifically includes the freight streets. I don't think freight streets necessarily get a higher score than other busy arterials.
Yeah, and if I said freight, I meant transit, sorry.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, so,
apologies.
so yes, frequent transit streets do get a higher priority. That's part of the foundation or framework of the plan itself.
Okay.
That only streets that are on the frequent transit network or in close proximity to schools are in the priority investment network.
I may connect you with this constituent, and I'll get educated in the process of this too.
Okay.
So thanks for addressing that. Colleagues, any other questions or comments? We're obviously, funding for the ongoing pedestrian work. I mean, Brian, you mentioned we're on the trajectory. That depends on a number of sources. We'll be seeing the budget in a few days. And so we'll have a sense to an opportunity to evaluate the set of investments in there. Obviously, the prioritization, it really helps about which projects we're going to do next. The scale with which we can invest tells us how many of those projects we can get through and how soon. So we'll be looking at that too. But this is really helpful in advance of the budget. So thanks for your work on that. Thank you so much. All right. Next agenda item. Susie.
Agenda item 5, the Bicycle Master Plan Progress Report.
We do quick introductions.
Hello, my name is Monica Dewald. I manage the Bicycle Master Plan for SDOT in the Project Development Division.
And Darby's still here.
Yes.
Welcome, Monica.
Thank you.
I won't give any introductory remarks other than to note that this is a progress report as opposed to an implementation plan. So
Thank you.
You'll cover the distinction and why we're here.
Yes.
So why don't you jump right in?
So unlike the other modal plans that have been here today, we are here to provide just a 6-month progress report for the 2018 planned projects. We do our annual implementation plan, which we present to council in March of every year, so you should be seeing that this March. What I'm going to go over today is just an update on our 2018 projects, some of the BMP strategies and actions that we work on outside of developing and implementing bike facilities, and talk about our next steps for the 2019 implementation plan. So, as you know, the City of Seattle, we're working to make biking a comfortable and integral part of our daily life for all ages and abilities, and the projects that we've worked on this year are of that nature. They are the all ages and abilities facilities. So far this year, we've completed 8.6 miles of bike facilities. Some of the highlights that we've completed this year are a couple projects you may have heard of, 2nd Avenue and 7th. We've also did a bike upgrade to Banner Way. We've completed 3 different neighborhood greenways, one in Highland Park, one in Olympic Hills, and one we're particularly proud of is the Rainier Valley Phase 1, which is our longest greenway we've implemented so far at 5.5 miles. With this, that leaves us with about 10 more miles of bike facilities to implement. As of today, we are on track for construction of the last 10 miles to be completed by the end of December or early January, with the possibility delay of 35th Avenue Northeast. If that particular project is delayed, we would complete a delivery of 17.5 miles this year. Some of the highlights that you have yet to see this year will be the completion of the second part of the South Dearborn Protected Bike Lane. We will be implementing a 1.1 mile protected bike lane, kind of combo, a PBL bike lane on South Columbia Way. We'll have another 2.7 miles of a greenway implemented in the north of Seattle, and we are building a connection to Eagle Staff Middle School. So, as well as implementing various bike facilities, we also implement various strategies and actions as directed from our 2014 Bicycle Master Plan. Some of the things that we're working on is we're looking at how the level of traffic stress for bicyclists is impacted by roadway design. So that means the volume, speeds, how all these impact kind of the level of stress that you feel when you're on that roadway. We did a snapshot of various roadways throughout the city, and we are going to use this information to help guide us with future bike facilities and look at potential upgrades on existing facilities.
Do you measure the traffic stress by surveys of bicyclists, or how do you?
We measure it by, we take many different factors of the roadway design, slope, speed, volumes, roadway width, whether it's a freight route, et cetera.
Okay. So it's by looking at the physical features, not talking to bicyclists and asking them if...
Correct. Another project that we're going to do a phase 2 on is, I'm sure you've heard of, and you heard about this as it was implemented into the previous modal plans, is we are working on our bicycle and pedestrian safety analysis. We'll call it the phase 2. If you're unfamiliar with what we completed 2 years ago, the BPSA was a research project which incorporated 7 years of data, which helped us identify risk factors and complete a multivariate analysis to figure out what those risk factors were, where they were in the city, so we could go out and make changes to those risk factors prior to anything happening at those intersections. Phase 2 is going to include some things of, will include bike performance safety measures. We're going to do an evaluation of protected bike lanes, and we are also going to continue to build our exposure model, just as some of the highlights of that second phase of analysis. The BPSA, all the research helps drive where we do bike spot safety as well as pedestrian spot safety projects. We have completed 6 bike spot safety projects this year, and we plan on completing 6 more by the end of this year, which is above what our Move Seattle deliverables are. As well as spot improvements, we implement bike racks throughout the city, which we identify or count as bike parking spaces. So as of today, we have implemented 180 bike parking spaces throughout the city, and we have planned to do 170 more, and that whole program is way ahead of, we'll probably have that complete before the levy is over. So it's one that's quite successful so far.
Now the bike parking spots, are those driven by some sort of SDOT analysis, or is there still a program where businesses or residents can call and suggest a location, or how do we decide what's next?
Sure, there's a lot of factors that decide bike spot safety. The BMP is under the Vision Zero umbrella, so our bicycle and pedestrian safety analysis had created a prioritized list of projects that we knew for both bikes and peds, or we know for both bikes and peds we want to prioritize and start an implementation. So we get some of our projects from there. We get projects that come from our high collision evaluation, as well as various other plans, the trails upgrade plan. Citizens may want to prioritize a project, and we do fold in other recommendations, and we just try to prioritize them with the amount of funding we have.
That is excellent. That wasn't actually my question, but it was a really good, so I didn't want to interrupt you. I was talking more about the bike racks specifically, about how we select where those locations are.
So there's multiple ways. We have a long list of citizen-requested bike racks as well as businesses, and then we proactively look at where we are developing new bike facilities and where businesses in major hubs. So it comes from multiple locations.
And I assume, like so many things, it's constrained. So if a business calls tomorrow, it's not like we come out and install one in a month or a week. It's like, we'll put you on a list and we'll see how the evaluation goes. And is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And I know with new development, oftentimes they're installing them on their own, which is great too.
They are. Yeah. So you think about, why are we implementing all of these all ages and abilities? And we were really amazed to see some fabulous results with our 2nd Avenue bike lane. When we completed the 2nd Avenue bike lane and the 7th Avenue PBL, I should say, we created an all ages and abilities network that connected you from South Lake Union through the Central District to Pioneer Square. And we've seen really amazing results with a 31% increase from January of this year to August. So that's really telling that these type of facilities are making a big impact on getting more people on bikes.
Yeah, that's great.
So our next steps is we are going to be developing, we typically come to council with a 5-year plan every year, but we are going to align this last one and make it a 6-year plan to align with the levy to move Seattle. We should be presenting that in March. As I said, we are going to align what projects we select in regards to the budget and costs that are in alignment with the levy. And we're going to complete quarterly status reports for the Bike Advisory Board as well as for the office, the Levy Oversight Committee. Any questions?
Councilmember?
Less a question, more of just a comment. You know, as somebody who represents about 50% of the projects under construction phase for the next 6 months, you know, just want to highlight how excited most of my constituents are about those projects. Some folks around the Wedgwood neighborhood notwithstanding. But generally, you know, one of the things that would be helpful for us is to have a better understanding about some of the neighborhood protected bike lanes outside of downtown that have been constructed. So, you know, I know, have seen similar results in other neighborhoods like the Roosevelt protected bike lane and some of the other protected bike lanes that we've installed in the non-downtown. Those data points would be helpful for me to get a better handle on too as we talk about protected bike lanes out in neighborhoods, because as you can imagine, a common refrain would be, well, downtown is different than XYZ neighborhood. And to a certain extent, that is true. Our density of employment and our density of population downtown is different from other neighborhoods. But I would imagine the if you build it, they will come nature of the success story that we've got on 2nd Avenue is easily replicated in other neighborhoods too. So as we talk about other safety improvements that are happening as a result of those incredible opportunities that present themselves when we've got other paving projects and we go in and make those determinations to build protected bike lanes in collaboration with other projects, I think those are important stories that we need to tell. And, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't say I'm grateful to folks for hanging in there as we, some of our little projects have been a little controversial and may have had a little time slippage as we try to rally folks to get together and talk about ways that we can make sure that we're building an investment that is safe for everybody and addresses some of the hot community concerns that are out there. End of political soliloquy.
Thanks.
Perfect, thank you.
Monica, you mentioned earlier that if the 35th Avenue project slips, that might slow it up. Is there, and I also noticed in the actual report, it shows completion in Q2 of 2019. Can you speak to that a little bit about where that project is? Or Darby?
Or Rob?
Or Rob?
Or Rob.
I mean, my understanding is it's under construction.
It is under construction. Right now, we are planning to put in, as the pavement is completed, we will be putting in temporary tape for the lane lines that were existing ahead of time as we continue conversations with the community.
I think it's fair to say, Councilmember Bryan, that this project has had a unique amount of attention given the volume of correspondence on this particular project. And as a result, I've asked the mayor and her team to have SDOT continue to work with representatives of both the business community and the residents around Wedgwood to try to find a way for us to come to a conclusion that results in taking the temperature down on this project a little bit while also maintaining our commitment to building a protected bike lane, which is part of the bicycle master plan and part of my vision for how we make sure that we connect communities in the Northeast to the other existing protected bike lanes that are in our network or already exist. So we, I believe in my office, are trying to drive towards a consensus that would allow us to stay on schedule, but I recognize that, you know, we thought we'd be a little bit further along in the construction of this project as of September 18th than we actually are. And that's I own that there's a slippage there that I helped to cause.
I would add that we're seeing some slowdown in our construction, and contractors are so busy right now that we do see some delay in getting started just because the volume of work that they have is so significant. So I wouldn't attribute all of this to the fact that it's a bike facility.
Okay, great, thank you. I don't have anything else. Thanks so much for the report. Similar to what we said in the last couple, we were entering budget and we'll be watching that. You're obviously aware of the resolution we passed a few months ago too, and so we'll be looking forward to watching how that plays out through the budget process too.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Darby. Hi, Lakeisha. Would you read the next agenda item into the record for me?
Yes, Council Bill 119329, an ordinance relating to employment in Seattle. Briefing, discussion, and possible vote.
Great. I'll invite presenters forward. Calvin and Alicia, if you want to introduce yourselves when you're ready. Party.
We have 2 more people joining us.
As everyone gets settled.
Calvin
Hi,
Chow
my
with
name is
Council Central Staff.
Alicia DeLosto. I'm working with Councilmember Mike O'Brien.
Marty Garfinkel, Director of Office of Labor Standards.
And Janae Jan, also with the Office of Labor Standards.
Great. So before we jump into this, I'll just give a little background. I'm getting good at this because we had this in committee a lot. At our last committee meeting, we went over just kind of a brief update of what some of the outreach had looked like. Councilmember Johnson, you had suggested that we bring the Office of Labor Standards here so that we could ask some questions about what enforcement looks like on this. So I really appreciate both of you making the time to come here and discuss that. And so with that, why don't we jump in. Alicia, you have a little presentation. We'll walk through that, and then we can have a little discussion, probably ask OLS a few questions, and then my hope is to move forward and passing this out of committee.
All right. Today we're going to be discussing the Commuter Benefits Ordinance. And to remind the public and council members who were not here for previous committee meetings, the commuter benefits are qualified transportation benefits that may be excluded from gross income subject to federal taxes for both the employer and employee. The benefit is allowed under the IRS code 132F and is available for all employees. The Commuter Benefits Ordinance will require specific types of businesses, not including government or nonprofit organizations, to notify and provide employees with commuter benefits. This would allow employees to allocate up to $255 per month before taxes for transit expenses, and this type of regulation would save businesses up to 9% on payroll taxes, and an employee would save between 20 to 40% on their transit expenses. And part of the legislation is the enforcement regulation, which is described on this slide, and representatives from OLS, the Office of Labor Standards, can speak further on this and answer any questions.
Great. So one of the things that we've been doing, one of the reasons we've been discussing this for over a year in this committee is we wanted to do really robust outreach with the business community, in addition to transit advocates and employees who are looking to better access transit. And the larger employees, for the most part, are often part of programs through other state commute trip reduction requirements. And so, not that that is a parallel to this, but a lot of them have because of the other state requirements, often have commuter programs in place. And what we found, working with our partner Commute Seattle, who we funded in the budget last year to do more outreach to small and mid-sized businesses and more neighborhood-based businesses as opposed to businesses that are concentrated downtown, is there's a lot of businesses are not aware that this IRS tax code benefit exists. There's some that are vaguely aware of it but haven't had the time to implement it. And so in that outreach, we've been trying to better understand what concerns and try to address them. I'll talk about a couple of them, but one of them that came up was, what does enforcement look like? And Office of Labor Standards, you're a relatively new office, but play a really important role in a number of regulations we have in place. And so I wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to talk about how you would envision this going forward. And so maybe you can take a minute and talk about that.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity to address this. As you know, the proposed ordinance has a pretty soft launch, a more extended launch period than we've seen with some of the other ordinances. the law really doesn't go into effect until the middle of next year, and enforcement doesn't kick in, possible enforcement doesn't kick in until a year after that. So we're talking about 2020. The ordinance provides an opportunity in the event of a possible violation of a cure period with no financial impact. So if someone calls our office, and we contact the employer and find out whether in fact the ordinance has been complied with. If it has not, the employer has 90 days to comply with no financial impact. We don't have that type of provision in any of other labor standards. And then if there's a second violation, it's I believe, a $500 fine for the employer, no matter how many employees they have. So it's not a per employee violation. Again, a fairly light touch in terms of enforcement. And you only really get into a more significant financial impact if it's the third violation. So, and we don't expect that to happen much at all, if at all. The other thing I'll say that might be of interest is generally our practice, and it would be consistent with this, is if someone comes to us with a violation, a possible violation or an allegation of a violation into a particular ordinance, we investigate that violation and that ordinance, unless for some reason we have reason to believe that other ordinances have been violated. But we don't use every investigation as an opportunity to investigate every single ordinance, and we would continue that practice.
I appreciate that, Marty. Thanks for being here and walking through that. I also want to thank you all. I know this was not legislation that you came to me asking to do. This is something that we've heard from advocates and want to implement. The main goal is we really would love to see more affordable access to transit for so many employees who work for especially smaller businesses. And the obvious place to put this is in the Office of Labor Standards. So I appreciate your working with us through this process and helping to craft legislation consistent with some of your rules, and I appreciate you being here to explain that. One of the things I've mentioned before, in New York City, another city that has a similar ordinance, in the first 18 months of their program, they had, I think it was 8 complaints. My understanding is all those complaints were resolved without any sort of fines. Compliance here is, we believe, is setting up a program that will save both the employer and the employee money. So we expect that to the extent there will be, that people will be out of compliance, that it'll most likely be from a lack of understanding and that we can provide those services. And we intend to continue to support Commute Seattle to work with businesses. Another thing I'll say, colleagues, I haven't heard from any businesses. I mean, various businesses have had concerns. They've been mostly of the flavor of we'd rather not be regulated to do anything. We would love to do a program like this. It does make sense, but we'd rather not you tell us we have to do it. Because there are so many employees that are missing out on this opportunity, I do believe that a regulation makes sense. But I've told businesses that, if they come forward and can demonstrate like why a particular business or type of business it's really hard to comply with or why it wouldn't make sense, in the next couple of years, open to considering revisions to that. No one has come forward with any compelling story about why their business should be excluded from this to date, and I can't anticipate anyone in talking to the folks who've been doing all the outreach work. But, we may learn more as we go forward, and I want to be flexible on that. Either of you have questions for OLS and how they plan to move forward? Councilmember Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, I recognize that the enforcement piece is certainly not the goal. Our goal is, as you so well articulated, finding ways for more employees to get access to a pre-tax commuter benefit. But that one, notwithstanding, 15 pages of the bill are about enforcement. So I think it'd be helpful to just hear a little bit more about sort of the process by which OLS investigates, for lack of a better term, and maybe investigates is the accurate term, complaint-based systems. So we are marching forward with intent today to pass a bill out of committee, which would go to the full council, and presuming it pass, as you mentioned, Director Garfinkel, won't have an enforcement period until 2020. what do you do for the next 18 months to inform people about the new regulations that will become enforceable at some point in 2020? And then, post that enforcement date, what happens when somebody calls and says, my boss won't let me get the pre-tax benefit that I'm allowed?
Before I answer, I also want to just recognize Janae John, who's sitting next to me, who's our policy analyst, who's done all the heavy lifting on this work. So, and Janae, feel free to jump in. Well, until our enforcement authority kicks in, the answer is fairly straightforward. We're going to be working with Commute Seattle, directing questions to them on the outreach basis. If there are opportunities for us to, and this even would apply after enforcement kicks in, if there's opportunities for us to contact the business immediately with a phone call and try to clear it up, we expect we'll be able to do that, and we can do that with existing staff. And so once enforcement kicks in, we're going to have to adapt a little bit what we typically do because we're going to want to trigger that 90-day period as quickly as possible. I do want to point out that, and we looked at this closely, that 90-day period doesn't start from the date the phone call comes. It's from the date we open an investigation. So that gives us actually more than 90 days from the time the person calls, and I think that's important for people to realize. If someone calls the office, the clock isn't immediately ticking. And so, because for workload-based reasons or whatever it might take a few weeks to get back to that person, it's only once we start the investigation that 90-day kicks in. And that should give us more than enough time to contact the business and try to work it out for all the reasons that you've explained. And yes, there's a lot of pages devoted to enforcement, but I would say that's more a question of keeping our labor standards consistent, because this is language really taken from all the other labor standards. And once you start changing one labor standard to another, you run into other problems, and which led to harmonization statute that you all passed a little while ago in order to keep some consistency between laws. So I really don't think the number of pages should lead anyone to think that we're not going to apply the law as written, which is really a conciliation model.
I think to piggyback on Marty's comments to the length of the words in the ordinance, I think a lot of it, our process is rooted in due process and fairness. So we want to make sure that everyone understands the tools that are available and what to expect if something comes forward as a complaint and what to expect during that process. So a lot of the words are, in fact, rooted in that and consistency with the other ordinances. Again, distinguishing this ordinance from others, which is they do have that 90-day compliance period, which our staff are in talking to them are excited about in terms of making sure that we can resolve these very quickly if it does come up that there are many complaints.
Janae, if you'll permit a follow-up, Janae, would that include, one of the things that I think Councilmember O'Brien's staff heard during outreach to the business community was access to payroll services and just the complicated quote-unquote nature of applying something like this through a payroll service. Would that sort of offer of assistance include referrals to models or individuals or services that might exist that would help a small employer who is covered under the ordinance comply that they may not have access to at that point?
I mean, I think that's a brilliant suggestion. I think the way that, at least in that first year, depending on how we roll out outreach and engagement with hopefully Commute Seattle and SDOT, I think the idea is to put our heads together to figure out what kind of package of information we can provide. After, in the future, we currently have business engagement specialists who answer questions directly to businesses. So I could imagine that this would just be added to the repertoire of added to our bucket of things that we'll be talking about to employers, yeah.
And I assume you put out materials on an annual basis that employers post about things, and this would be added to the list of things. So, both business owners would hopefully be aware of what they're putting up, and then employees would know that this is a, upcoming or pending requirement. Commute Seattle is going to play, probably somewhat unique to this relative to some of the other standards you enforce. Commute Seattle will continue to play a really kind of front row role in this. In the discussions we've had with Commute Seattle, and they've been at the table a few times in the past, they have talked about, they have sheets that they can share that talk about the different ways to comply. I believe I heard Nick say that, every payroll system that they're aware of that they've talked to has this built into the payroll software. So, this is a national program that exists, and while it's not heavily utilized, payroll systems that are working across the country have been asked this thousands of times, and so it's already embedded in payroll systems. Obviously, some people might be doing payroll manually still, probably just really small businesses, maybe mostly under 20 employees, I don't know, but there are probably some businesses with more than 20 employees that are doing payroll manually, so that's different. There's a couple models how they can do it, and what Commute Seattle has said is, we can give you the flyers and the brochures, or we can come out and talk to you, and you describe your business, and we can say, based on what you're telling me, what I would recommend is using this third-party provider that can, basically employees would sign up and their credit cards would trigger expenses, and they would get an after-the-fact reimbursement pre-tax. Or, you might want to do is do an ORCA passport program or other ORCA business programs. So, ORCA, there's not passport, there's another one, I forget the name of it. But anyway, where you put money on it. So there's a host of things, and Commute Seattle is very well informed about how they work and the ease and the hurdles with them. And so as long as we can keep Commute Seattle doing that, and the question was asked, well, we have the capacity, and they said is even in this implementation where we're proactively calling businesses and chambers, yes, we have, we can get on your schedule within a couple days to come talk to you. So I think it's a really good question, and it's something that we'll want to watch going forward.
Couple more.
Jump in.
So one of the highlights in the fiscal note here is that this may have a 2020 budgetary impact. As Councilmember O'Brien said early on, other cities much larger than ours who have implemented a program have not seen a huge volume of folks calling. I'm curious how OLS plans to track that and how we might be kept informed of potential budgetary impacts should circumstances change and this looks to be a larger workload than what is currently anticipated.
Sure. We've heard that information too, and our current view is we can absorb the enforcement burden with what our staff is and will be. But we certainly track all the investigations. We track all the inquiries by type of ordinance, and we'll be happy to keep you informed about that.
And is there a quarterly report on that, an annual report? Is how are you tracking, and how's that information presented?
Well, we have a dashboard that we, at least on a quarterly basis, put up a lot of that information, and sometimes the details are underneath the dashboard, and we could certainly pay particular attention to this issue, as we should, because we want to know ourselves what the impact is. But this is not one of the areas that worry me in terms of enforcement. I think we can handle it, and especially because of this conciliation model, the burden on the staff will be less for each investigation.
I appreciate that. I think that in this space between implementation and enforcement, that sort of grace period year, if you want to call it that, having OLS enforcement staff be tracking the questions that they get to ensure that it is truing up with what we think a conciliatory model would look like, but that if it is not, that we can be appropriately prepared as part of the 2020 budget conversation, which we'll have this time next year,
right.
That we have a good sense about how we might be able to appropriately resource OLS if things turn out to not be as absorbable as we all hope that it will be.
Well, I appreciate that, and I hope my expectation turns out to be true. The other expectation that we have is that Commute Seattle will be around during this, at least initial period, and I look forward to coordinating with them on these inquiries as well, and perhaps there could be some joint reporting there, because there may be some inquiries that go directly to them. In other cases, we might get a call and then direct it to Commute Seattle. And what your question is raising is when we get that kind of call, we don't treat it like just some other referral that goes into some just general referral box, but that we actually get enough information about it before we refer so that we can track it. Because as I understand it, hopefully Commute Seattle will be around, but we don't know for how long, and we need to know what that universe of inquiries look like. So we will do that.
And Councilmember Bryan, at the previous committee discussion, you talked about sort of a differentiated model in terms of the timeline of when businesses would be required to comply with the ordinance based on the size of the employees. The base legislation still just includes the same number of employees at 20, and the compliance standard is still kind of on the same timeline of the bill goes into effect in 2019 and enforcement doesn't start until 2020. Is that still your expectation for the action that we're going to take today?
You know, I have an amendment that I'll share that would make a change. I talked to a handful of businesses recently about the process, trying to see, especially some folks that had some concerns about how we might address them. And I think, frankly, a lot of what you all said today, I think it addresses, you know, they still have fear and concern. So it's good that you, on the record, talking to us. I appreciate you being here. I feel comfortable that the approach will work out. They may still have some fears, but we'll hope those don't materialize. The distinction between one of the things I talked about was 20 employees versus 50 employees and maybe having a two-tier system. I didn't hear back that seemed to maybe add just more confusion as opposed to clarity. What I did hear was, you know, again, there's a preference to just not be required to do this, but a desire to comply regardless because they want to do it. I heard that because of some other regulations that are coming on, some of the smaller businesses where it may be just one or two folks trying to administer it, they would like a little more breathing room. I think we've been pretty generous, but my original intent was to have a year until implementation and then another year of that grace period. And so we're now into September instead of July. So one of the things, my amendment here would actually move that to January 1 of 2020 would be the implementation date, and January 1 of 2021 would be the enforcement. So 6 months more in both of those periods than we had discussed. Essentially, a little over 2 years from today would be when enforcement would begin, with the understanding that enforcement starts with a call back to them to comply, a 90-day window. So again, pretty light touch. And so my sense is that gives folks a little more breathing room. Again, Commute Seattle will be out there, is already out there, and my hope is that they will be talking to employers when they have a moment free to think through this, and that they can implement this as soon as possible. The sooner they implement it, the sooner that the business can start saving some tax money, and perhaps more importantly, the employees can reduce their transit costs, which I think would be really great. I would like to move this. Council members, if you have any questions or concerns on this.
I'll second that motion and just say I think that, you know, we already have a complicated regulatory environment. I was concerned about a differentiated system, and this seems like a simpler and wiser approach, so I'm grateful to you for the flexibility. This I think is going to alleviate concerns, and I'm happy to support it.
Great. And then again, some of the businesses were supportive too, of just simplicity helps them too. So I'll go ahead and move, let's see, on this sheet, we'll just call this Amendment 1.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Any other questions on this? If not, we'll go ahead and move the bill out of committee as amended. I'll go ahead and move Council Bill 119329 as amended.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Thanks for all your work. I really appreciate it. I know you got a lot on your plate. Thanks for being here. Alicia, thanks for your presentation today too. And this will go to full council on next Monday, the 24th.
Hey, congratulations on a thing you've been working on for 18 months.
18 months, you know. And we'll be working on it for another two years and change, but hey, we're going to get there.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Councilmember. Appreciate it. Lakeisha, do you mind reading the next agenda item in?
Clerk file 314402, petition of SBH LLC for the vacation of a portion of 9th Avenue South, south of South Hines Street. Briefing and discussion.
Hello, everyone. There's a familiar face that I haven't seen at this table in a while.
Hello.
Hi, Darby.
Nice to be here.
When folks are settled, we'll start with a round of introductions, and then we'll jump into kind of the briefing. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Beverly Barnett, Seattle Department of Transportation. Darby Ducombe, lawyer for SBH.
Right bracket, B of SBH.
Juliet Vong, HPB Landscape Architecture.
Michael Jenkins, Seattle Design Commission.
Tony Talton, General Manager, Seattle Nissan.
Great. Hello, everyone. Beverly, do you want to start teeing this up for us and start to get us informed?
Yes, I think Michael and I are going to start us off, and then the main presentation is going to be Darby, who's going to go through our PowerPoint pretty quickly. This is the very first project, the very first petition that has come in under the revised street vacation policies. So one of the things that the new policies provide is that it creates an opportunity for an early project briefing so that we come in before the Transportation Committee and give you an overview of a proposal, and it's before too much work has been done on it. So it hasn't been to the Design Commission yet. I haven't winnowed issues or started solving problems, so that we're here just to say, this is the idea, this is the proposal, and the intention is to create an opportunity for the community to speak early on, or for council members to provide us some direction as we get into the review. And we thought, well, with some projects, you may have a lot of direction for us, some not so much, and so we'll just sort of see how it works. So we did do early project briefings recently for a couple of city light projects, but one of those we didn't have a petition yet, and one of those is in under the old policy. So this is sort of our first brand new pristine issue. And I think Michael has a couple comments. I think the only thing that I would want to say is one thing that we always look at with a street vacation is the public benefit. So as we get into our review, we'd be looking at the scale of the proposal, the impacts of the project, and balancing that against the public benefit proposal. And in this case, this is the first project that's worked on the early community notification, where and we do have a part of the PowerPoint covers that, so that we're then measuring not only our usual balance of do the proposed measures serve the public, and is the public benefit adequate to the impacts, but also what did we hear from the community about their priorities or what they'd like to see associated with the project. This is an industrial project, so we're less concerned about some of the design issues, but one of the things we will be looking at is access to the site and the number of points of access. And so I think those will be kind of our two main tracks. And then I think Michael wanted to make some comments, and then Darby's going to go through the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Beverly. If you remember when the policies were redone, we wanted to make sure that the Design Commission had a really early look at the project before it was either A, starting the design review process through the early design guidance review, or if it was a capital project, that it would come to us at what we call pre-concept. So they're looking at several different options for the site, both with a vacation and no vacation alternative. This is neither. It's not subject to design review, and it's not a capital project. But we have met and talked on a number of occasions about some of the issues that we're concerned with. The project, part of the project is actually under construction now, so that's an issue I think that the Commission will want to hear more about, in particular with a no vacation alternative. And then because of its, and you can see the curve of the right-of-way poses some interesting challenges for access, both for safety and identity. And so that's going to be of a particular issue for the Commission. And then finally, the idea about public benefit. Normally, we see a lot of sites occurring in a lot of our residential neighborhoods or in our commercial neighborhoods. Again, this is neither. And so the challenge for the applicant is to come up with a public benefit package that meets that commensurate test that you're always interested in a neighborhood that is not necessarily what we would traditionally see. And so how you balance those expectations is going to be of issue not only with the Commission, but ultimately with the department and with you.
Ready?
Darby, jump in.
Okay, thanks. So this is just a brief overview of where we're going to go in the next 3 minutes. I've got about 3 minutes prepared to go through 18 slides. Feel free to jump in anytime, but...
Because you have extra minutes to burn.
Well, you know, Beverly's got me on a tight schedule and well-trained. And so there will be time at the end for sure, but jump in anytime if you've got something you want to ask right away. From here, you can see the overall site plan on the slide. It's located in southeast SoDo in what I call the armpit of the I-5 West Seattle Bridge off-ramp. It's located between Airport Way South and I-5. Occupied first by railroad storage in the early days and then trailer storage. The historical use of this site has been outdoor storage, both the private property and the public property. This is a big overview of sort of why we're here. Auto dealerships need lots of storage space. Here you can see from the topography, the site's very constrained due to the freeway infrastructure and the topography. Here, the slide shows the zoning. We're in industrial zoning 2, and outdoor storage is permitted outright, as well as an auto dealership subject to certain size limitations. This is the proposed project. This is the slide we wanted to get to as soon as possible in our little presentation here. Currently, the Seattle Nissan Phase 1 is under construction and should be completed in the 4th quarter of this year. The Phase 2 project involves increased outdoor storage and the vacated areas. There are still, as Beverly and Michael alluded to, several design issues that we're having because of the topography and the other infrastructure in the area. So I think you're going to probably see some changes there at the end, those 2 drives on the left there that are in the Hines Street area and that far north drive. But in general, this is what the site is going to look like. This is the grand vision for the final project. This slide gives you an overview of the right-of-way areas by dimension and square footage. On the one hand, it's really quite sizable in terms of its square footage, but on the other hand, it's all areas that are unopened, unimproved, and inaccessible due to location, other constraints, and the topography. This is the 9-block analysis. To the north is the Rainier Brewery site, you may remember, and then across the street is the Sound Transit Maintenance Yard. This is the site plan with the proposed vacation. Here, storage space potential is about 269 vehicles, which allows for more on-site storage with fewer impacts to the local roadways. It also allows for increased all-electrical vehicle sales, meeting our carbon neutral goals, right? Increased jobs and increased revenue. Without the vacation, the no vacation alternative, outdoor storage is reduced by about 48%. Maybe a total of 142 vehicle storage spaces, which is about half what the dealership needs. And with that comes cars from moving in from other places and more impacts to the local roadways. Here, and so here's the side-by-side view. So you can see the plan with the vacation proposal on the left, and then the plan without the vacation on the right. We have been engaged in a lot of community engagement. I've been working with the community for about 18 months, getting feedback from them. We're really engaged with the SoDo BIA. Most people are concerned about public safety in the area, enhanced landscaping and vehicle speeds. This spring, we redid our mailer, our online survey, and we walked the 1,000-foot area to reach the local businesses. And then that allowed us to better align with the new DON Rule 2, but we were really close to that anyway. And so this is what we've been hearing, you know, pay more attention to the area, clean it up and keep it that way, enhance landscaping. The Port of Seattle is officially a no comment because we're more than a mile from their closest gate. Here's a preliminary look at the public benefit areas, which currently consists of enhanced landscaping, urban design, and wayfinding art. It's mostly in those green or like yellow-green areas and the red areas, and the dark green areas is the places that will be implemented regardless of the vacation.
Beverly, is the Hind Street kind of cul-de-sac, does that exist?
No, it's completely unopened right now and actually has a fence across it.
And so is part of this, will that get built? Does that stop planning to build it, or is that just someday maybe, but you'll do the landscaping?
So South Hines is actually proposed to be vacated. We do have a signature from the property owner to the north, and that's one of our questions, would be making sure that Nissan and the owner to the north both would have equal access, even if vacated. But this cul-de-sac design would provide for sort of safe turnaround access use, but right now it is proposed for vacation.
Got it. Thank you.
Two quick ones.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that the public understands you're not planning to build storage under the preliminary benefit proposal on top of what I assume is access points to or from the West Seattle Bridge.
No, that would be under.
Yes. But then secondly, it does look like there's kind of a little off ramp from off the West Seattle Bridge that you might be connecting to if you get the public benefit to a proposed car wash. Am I catching that access point right?
It's actually not from the off-ramp. It's a ramp that goes up from ground level from the dealership to additional property they own for just storage of vehicles.
Okay, so that would also be, again, sort of subterranean to whatever structure we're looking at right there. So that little elevation, you'd kind of run up a ramp, and there'd be more storage kind of hidden behind underneath structures up there.
Right. The highway infrastructure is very tall and really dominates really high over the dealership.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And so here's our preliminary proposal right now for public benefits. Enhanced landscaping, more trees, urban design treatments, and working with the SoDo BIA, wayfinding art for their utility box wraps. We're still taking community input. We're going to, after the Design Commission meeting on October 4th, and after we get technical review back from the city, host another open house and do some more work to really work with folks who work and travel through that area. And there you can see how the highway infrastructure sort of is up higher there on the dealership. Any questions?
I'll just comment that I really appreciate you all coming this early in the process. I don't have anything specific at the moment. I'm kind of intrigued by the public benefit and it's as Beverly said, kind of unique location and trying to do some things. And so I may kind of scratch my head about that and may send over just some preliminary comments or thoughts as I think through that. It's a pretty significant amount of square footage, obviously, when you add up all the parcels. I'm curious, historically, did Airport Way ever continue straight there, or was that just always as the grid layout way back when?
Historically, that little arm of Airport Way South was Old Seattle Boulevard, and it dead-ended right there where the words proposed car wash are, because it was water and it was canals.
Wow.
And so north of us, the right-of-way is much more constrained. It's only 80 feet wide, and south of us, south of the South Spokane Street Bridge, it's only 80 feet wide, but in this little tiny area, it's a little wider.
Yeah.
Just based out of historical development, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm aware that homelessness is a concern everywhere in the city, and certainly in SoDo is an area where you hear it. You're obviously proximate to the green belt under the I-5 there too. And so, I'm curious on the outreach, what kind of, things folks are looking for as far as community benefit. The landscaping stuff, always looks great, and I think that benefits everybody. And always looking for creative things that we can, the public can benefit in the process of this. So
just south of us, right there where the South Spokane Street overpass is, there's actually a stairs that comes down from Columbia Way. So
really?
Folks from Beacon Hill can, on foot, access that area of South SoDo. And about 5 blocks south of us, there's a non-conforming residential building, artists, work lofts, And I have a plan to do some more outreach with them, to talk to them about.
Is that right before the bridge?
Yes.
Yeah.
On the south side, yeah, yeah.
Great, colleagues. Timing?
So this petition was introduced in mid-August. So right now it's in its first phase of review within the city. They go to the Design Commission in October 4th for the first meeting there, and the commission usually takes 2 to 3 meetings.
Depends.
So we would anticipate this would be coming to council next spring.
And so, for the public, one of the reasons why we want these meetings early is, one, to give you feedback, and if we have some strong concerns, that we're not going to send you off for 6 months in one direction and say we want to switch it. And so, as I mentioned, I don't have any strong concerns. I may have some more feedback if I think about this for the next couple weeks, and I'll maybe reach out to the Design Commission too to hear what they're thinking. But I appreciate this. Colleagues, I don't know if you have anything you want to add as far as guidance at this point. It sounds like not. So thanks for doing this work, and thanks for coming before us. And if I have any for share, I'll reach out.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all.
It's very helpful for us too to get any input.
Great. Lakeisha, last item on today's agenda.
Traffic Incident Management System, TIMS update, briefing and discussion.
Great. So as presenters are coming forward, I'll just remind the public, we started paying more attention to it. I'm not sure if we created the system or it existed and we just started paying more attention to it when the fish truck turned over on the Alaska Way Viaduct, or I guess it was just off the viaduct, but on the on-ramp to it, and caused major traffic concerns throughout the city, or major traffic disruption throughout the city for almost a whole business day. And so trying to figure out lessons learned. We've had a couple other incidents since then, and I think nothing has had quite the disruption that the fish truck did. And so we had asked to get an update, just remind us all how the system works, what we've learned, what worked well, and if there are tweaks that are going in the system as we move forward.
Great. So I'm going to introduce myself.
That'd be
and then
perfect.
Let others
Thank you.
introduce themselves too. They're here with me at the table. So thanks for the opportunity. Mark Bandy with the Seattle Department of Transportation.
Sonia Palma, Seattle Department of Transportation.
Steve Herjack with the Seattle Police Department.
Brady O'Brien, Seattle Fire Department.
Great. Thank you all for being here.
Again, thanks for having us. I do want to thank Sonia for stepping in on short notice today to be part of this presentation. Rodney Maxey was scheduled to be here with us. He is at home dealing with a family medical emergency. So thank you to Sonia for being here. So can you touch on the next slide? So we're going to touch on a few things that we've been working on. As you said, Councilmember O'Brien, we've been at this traffic incident management program since 2015. Here we are in 2018. We're going to touch on a few things that we've been working on this year, beginning with an update on our SDOT's response trucks and what those are like. We've got a Steer It, Clear It pamphlet that we're doing to help continue the education to the public about what that law and what their responsibilities are. We'll also talk about the 99 new tunnel that's going to be opening up here soon, and how that we've been working to get prepared for how we would do incident response with respect to that change coming up, and then a partnership thing we're doing with the state DOT and some other entities on kind of a regional approach to mitigating congestion around incidents.
Okay, so our SDOT response team motto is safely clearing roads and helping people. For every minute a road is blocked, it causes 4 to 10 minutes of delay. Our SRT operates 24/7, and we help to keep first responders and the public safe, as well as clearing roads to improve traffic mobility. To our knowledge, Seattle is the only large city with a standalone incident response team. We have increased the team from 5 responders to 9 responders and hired a supervisor who's a nationally recognized expert in this field to lead the team. SRT responds to about 100 to 130 calls a week. In the first 6 months of this year alone, we already responded to 2,700 calls. And what those incidents could be is anything from a vehicle collision to stranded motorists, signal issues, critical signs that have been damaged, fallen trees, debris, other types of incidents. Our trucks, our new trucks, all of our trucks are equipped with red lights and sirens, and the new trucks are lighter and narrower, which allows them to maneuver easily around traffic, which provides increased ability to get through tighter spaces. Our responders can push, pull, drag, stall vehicles, change tires, provide gas, and clear vehicle fluid spills. They receive special training, and they work under the National Unified Goal, which is responder safety, safe quick clearance, and prompt, reliable, interoperable communications. SRT provides emergency traffic control for incidents, which can free up other responders such as police, and so that they can respond to other calls. Chief O'Brien?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
The 2,700 calls so far this year, where do the calls come from? Does the average citizen know how to call you when something happens, or is this a referral from police or another agency?
So it's a variety of avenues, but we work closely with our Traffic Operations Center, Transportation Operations Center, which ADIM leads, and most of the calls come through them. So it could be through operator detection, or it could be police, and sometimes we do get calls from the public.
Got it. Great.
I would just add one other thing. Sometimes, so these trucks and our personnel are out 24/7, and so there's oftentimes they're coming just upon something that somebody's just run out of gas, or somebody lost some part of a load, and they pick it up and get out of the way. So there's also that kind of response going on.
Steer it and clear it. Steer it and clear it. As the Seattle Fire Department joined the group on how to kind of help with congestion in the greater Seattle area as a part of the response network in the city, we realized that as a fire department, we can't do a lot with the traffic per se, but one thing that we can do is we can help by educating the public. And so as a committee, what we came up with was this steer it and clear it pamphlet. I brought enough for everybody if you would like one. Could you pass those down to the, thank you. Essentially what it did was we kind of, we're just informing the community of an existing law that was on the books with, in Washington State. It was also passed as a resolution with the City Council, with all the department heads associated signing off on this. And the end product is very simple, which is great. And we all have these on our fire engines. And this is essentially the exact same information like an officer would give to an accident, like a fender bender type accident. They do an exchange of information for them. This is a 50-50 state. So most of the time, if there's barring injuries and as long as it's safe to do so, what this is essentially saying is let's, please move your vehicles, over off the side of the road. It's safer for everybody concerned. Plus it frees up traffic that much quicker. So that's what we can do, and we like it because these are on every fire engine and police car and in the SDOT Aero trucks. And so we are giving out an absolutely consistent message out to the public. Hopefully it sticks, and most people in small incidents want to stay and wait for the police to come and hopefully assign blame to the other party and so forth. Well, that typically never happens. They just exchange information and so forth. The other reason that it's important to have them on the fire engines is because a lot of times on a small incident, excuse me, a small accident, it's a low priority thing for the police department. We're going to go if there's unknown injuries or minor injuries or great injuries. But we're going every time. And so sometimes we'll be there for, we could be there for quite a while before an officer is available to respond. And so during that period of time, if it took 15 minutes, potentially we could have cleared the road 15 minutes earlier than it would have normally been cleared. So little bites out of the apple is what we're trying to take.
Yeah, 15 minutes and 2,700 incidents after whatever you said blocking causes how much delay. That starts to add up to real savings.
In addition to that portion of the plan. We are preparing for major incidents, major traffic incidents inside the tunnel when we switch over to the tunnel because it provides its own set of challenges because it's subterranean. So over the last 2 years, we've conducted 2 tabletop exercises to learn from the experiences and the practice putting into motion the traffic incident management plan. And we have one coming up where we have a full scale or dress rehearsal, if you will, in the real tunnel itself with real personnel going out to the tunnel on September 27th. We have both Seattle Police and Seattle Fire involved, but also other agency partners such as SDOT and WashDOT coming to the scene to practice this exercise. We're going to stage a simulated major traffic incident and be able to respond both for injuries and traffic redirection. The agencies that are involved are statewide and as well as community partners. We have over 70 participants coming to that exercise next week.
Okay, so then the last thing we want to touch on is this thing called the Seattle Area Joint Operations Group. So this is something that SDOT, SPD, and Seattle Fire Department are participating in with the Washington State Department of Transportation, the Washington State Patrol, and King County Metro. And this is in partnership with Challenge Seattle, which if you've not heard of that, that's a consortium of private businesses, the largest private businesses in the area, led by former Governor Greg Warr. And we've solicited the support of the University of Washington to help us collectively map out how we can improve the coordination on the congestion management regionally. And so the idea is to create effectively a virtual transportation operations center. How can we apply technology to how operators share information? We call each other right now, staff call each other to coordinate that, but what sort of technology can we apply to more seamlessly do that? How can we push out incident information of benefit to employees and employers who might be disrupted in their normal commute patterns? And so something sort of like a dynamic demand management strategy. How can we kind of let people know more quickly that your bus route's impacted, or today's the day to, we all talk about stay an hour longer and visit some business or some other retail establishment, but how do we get that information out more seamlessly? And with that, we'll answer any other questions that you might have on this topic.
I really appreciate the commitment to this work. It's may not be as critical as some of the first response work that the fire department and police department do, but obviously it can have a significant impact on daily lives. And of course, when our roads are at a gridlock throughout the city, you can't get to the first response things either. So that has an indirect impact on that too. And I appreciate kind of the commitment and the dedication of staff to make this work. It seems like it's going well. I'm curious on some of the major incidents, what we've seen. I think it was earlier this year when there was a truck on the Alaska Way Viaduct that was partially overhanging. I'm curious, how do you evaluate our system? What do we learn? Do we feel like at the end of it, is there a debrief period where we talk through, were there things we could have done to save 15 or 20 minutes here and stuff like that?
Sure, I'll speak to that. So it was, I want to say in March or April, there was the box truck that lost control and partially broke through the barrier on the lower deck of the viaduct. So some of the things that transpired differently there compared to the fish truck, several years ago, is that the priority was life safety of both the people involved in the incident and first responders, and then seeing what we could do to get basically traffic restored as best we could. It was a tricky incident. If you've seen the pictures, our incident responders did a fine job of keeping the scene safe and not have the vehicle go down onto people or things below. So that was a lot of the effort that was involved. Some of the things that was done differently in terms of procedures is recognizing the infrastructure damage that happened was to basically deploy our roadway structures teams that go and fix bridge rails to get it back into a safe condition, because we couldn't open that lane back to traffic with there being no bridge rail there. And that meant that, of course, the lane closure had to stay there longer, but at least we were able to return one lane to travel. And so that's kind of a notable difference. But that was a very, very tricky incident. So those are some of the things I think that I see differently now. We did do a debrief off of that. Staff got together and talked about, what went well, what could we done differently, those kinds of things. And that's done on a regular, ongoing basis. There's a group of people that meet monthly. So whenever there's a major incident or something just to kind of learn lessons from, they discuss it. Do you want to, Brady, you're part of those part of those discussions, as is Sonia.
I've been here since kind of the inception, actually, when we got together after the fish truck incident. And one of the items that was identified early in the process was the fact that a lot of our agencies in the city were operating in silos, so we weren't taking full advantage of the capabilities of each agency at certain different junctures. So part of the process of colluding as an interagency group has been to kind of share what our different capabilities are and make it okay to utilize those different capabilities in order to restore traffic, to work towards a common goal of getting things moving and so forth. For instance, on the fish truck, they were having a very difficult time riding it, and they had to restrap it and restrap it and restrap it to try and lift it and get it back up. And on the heels of that, we were able to offer, hey, we have 24/7 experts in the fire department that can assist with that type of thing. But we didn't use them for the fish truck for whatever reason. But property conservation is part of our mission in the fire department, so it's totally within our normal activities. Flash forward to this year, we had the box truck. We assisted with the rigging. Our technicians were there assisting with the rigging, working that scene along with the other people in more of a cooperative effort. So anyway, that's just one small example of, okay, we're becoming more of a full response organism, if you will, as opposed to individual silos going out and doing their thing. We're always looking for ways to try and complement each other and work together, because it is super important to keep stuff moving. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the past, the Seattle Police Department has had this model of rerouting that wasn't as collaborative with SDOT and taking advantage of their traffic operations center now. So there are efficiencies with the communication with Captain Santa's traffic section and the traffic operations center.
Well, it sounds like there's been a lot of progress made. I really appreciate the collaboration. It's easy for us to sit here and talk about silos and breaking down walls. I know to actually operationalize those things takes a lot of work and means a lot of people have to build relationships. And as those people change, how do you maintain them? And so it's good to hear that some of those things are operationalized and are happening. And I want to thank you all and your teams for doing the kind of work to change those systems for the benefit of everybody. So thanks for that. Colleagues, any other questions or thoughts on that? I hope there are no major incidents anytime in the near future. If there are, I'm glad you're out there, and we will undoubtedly be asked and be asking for just updates as they come along. But this is really great and helpful for being here. So thanks a lot.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
With that, we'll be adjourned till after budget. Thanks.